Hello, people. There's 7 people waiting. That's inspiring. Can everybody hear me? If people can, if you don't mind just popping something to the chat, just so I know that the sound is not terrible. While I try to fix some lighting here. Well, it's not great, but better, I guess. Anybody? Can you hear me? Something? I think my microphone's on. Oh, excellent. A confirmation from Darth Vader himself. That's an inspired way to start a Wednesday after an evening here. Anyways, whatever time it may be, wherever you guys are checking in from. That's it even sounds good. That's even better. Thank you for confirming that, Elijah. That's much appreciated. I'll give another couple of seconds here. You get to listen to me prattle and ramble just a little bit, and then for however long you stay, listen to me ramble and prattle. Hope everybody's doing well on a Wednesday afternoon / evening, Thursday morning for possibly some of you, earlier in the day, depending how far west you may be from me. It is Professor What? How is it going? I'm tired this week. It's only Wednesday, and it's a short week here in North America because we do our Labor Day, obviously, for anybody who may not be in North America or may be aware. Well, much of the world gets May 1st as Labor Day, like May Day, for a variety of anti-labor relation reasons. North America celebrates Labor Day on the first Monday in September, which was obviously this Monday. So I had a nice long weekend, but a 4-day week is always incredibly exhausting at my work. So I am dragging already, and it's only halfway through the week. So there we go. Okay, I am just getting myself something to drink. This is just me drinking Orangina. This is not sponsored, although if Orangina wants to offer us dollars to sponsor anything, that would be awesome. I can be paid in Orangina probably at this point, but yeah, MathWiz, you haven't been to one of these in a while. There hasn't been one of these in a while. I think this is actually only the third one that I've done in 2025. My schedule has been a little bit hectic through this year. I'm working full time. I've always, for the most part, I've usually been working full time, but I am recalled back into the office most days of the week, so it's tiring to come home and do all the things at home every day. I'm not going to complain. It's the same old story for a lot of us. But there hasn't been one of these. It's been a hard, I'm not going to say a hard year. It's been a rough year in with some things. It's been great with other things, but I haven't had the inspiration to do one of these in a while. But I figured, you know what? It's Wednesday, it's September. We're only 3 months away from Christmas, which is terrifying at this point. But did really want to just sort of like jump in, check in for anybody who may be interested in checking in. A couple of questions, informal conversation. This can go short, this can go a bit long, however long people want this to go, and sort of stick around. What I will try to do is, as I said, I have no presentation, I have no little blurb at the beginning of this. I just want to sort of, as I said, jump in and say hi to people. If people want to ask questions, I'm happy to answer questions to the best of my ability. I'm not an expert in most things in the world. I'm actually an expert in very, very few things, if anything, because the more that you know about something, the more you realize that you don't know about something. So I'm actually probably not an expert. It's like maybe one thing that I'm an expert at, and it has nothing to do with history. So, but yeah, I just wanted to sort of, as I said, jump in and say hi to people and give an opportunity to check in and sort of check in on everybody who's out there as well. This has been it's been a very strange and a very upsetting year for a lot of people. Some people are apparently very happy with it. This has been there's been a lot going on. There's a lot of flux and turmoil and chaos that have been happening throughout 2025. And it's just an opportunity to sort of, check in and, people can talk to me, whatever, talk to each other. It's all good. So, yeah, so I will try to pick out questions. Typically what happens with these, for anybody who may not have been to one of these or haven't been to one of these in a while, I will start answering a question that comes through the chat and post anything that you want. I reserve the right to answer what I feel like. But typically I will speak far longer on a single question, and questions and conversation sort of piles up, and then I will try to catch up, and we'll try to get through as much as tonight as either we can, we want to, whatever that happens to look like. So let's see. That's this is not a question, but this is just a comment, but it's a nice comment to see. Well-researched and factual, not biased. Everything has bias. This is actually a really good opportunity to speak to the whole bias thing. Everything has bias. There's no such thing as unbiased history. There's like literally there is no such thing as unbiased history, because it's not just about like like what you put in. There's also the stuff that you put like that you don't put in. Sometimes there's sometimes very deliberate choices. Sometimes it's accidental. Sometimes it's sort of on purpose. Whatever that looks like. To call any kind of history unbiased is it's not true. Um, Being honest with facts, being honest to the story, that's important. Telling a story is important, but again, being honest to it. That being said, thank you very much for the well-researched and factual is really what we strive for in this. The well-researched thing we all do, like all of us who work on the channel, do an immense amount of work every week, some of us every day, in terms of making sure that what we're doing is based around sources and good material and analytics and all those types of things. So thank you very much. That is a very welcome comment, and it warms my cold dead heart to hear that. Thank you. That's interesting. You hear that the Lenin mausoleum is closing due to renovation. Probably really not a surprise. I don't know the history of the mausoleum. Like the likelihood is that it's probably been closed for renovations at some other points in the past. I've been outside the mausoleum. I've been to Moscow several times. I've never actually been inside the mausoleum. The line was always too long, and going in to see a little shrinking guy in a crystal casket really, honestly, doesn't interest me that much. Just standing in Red Square and looking at the mausoleum was sort of that was cool enough for me. So if it is being closed, like properly closed for renovation, it's probably like long overdue, like so much renovation of public buildings. But I'm quite sure that mausoleum will be reopened. I shouldn't say I would expect. It would not surprise me that when Putin dies, that he ends up in the mausoleum somehow. Very like Stalin post 53. Then they finally they turfed him out in 62, I want to say, and then buried him in the Kremlin wall. I fully expect that something like that is going to happen with Putin. That he will be on display. But that's if that is happening, that's it's probably really long overdue in terms of having any work done on it. So that's this. I anticipated this question over the last few days. China, Russia, North Korea, and a whole host of other autocratic leaders from around the world have been having a bit of a shindig in Beijing, celebrating marking the 80th anniversary of the surrender of Japan, of VJ Day. Is it the beginning of a new Cold War? For those of you who have listened to me prattle on in these in the past, and I've been asked sort of this question about is there a new Cold War forming? I think we're moving closer to the conditions for a Cold War, but that's only provided that it stays as a Cold War. I think we are moving towards a new war, whether it's hot or cold. That remains to be seen. I think we're very much closer to a historical parallels are difficult because nothing's ever one-to-one, and there's always scope and room for changes and shifts and all kinds of differences. I think we're much closer, much more resemblant of a pre-World War I situation right now than we are of a or possibly even a pre-World War II situation. But I think we're closer to that than we are of a Cold War situation. Cold War was very much based on this bipolarity situation with two superpowers that were so much stronger than everybody else around them and could sort of like wrangle them and sort of like herding cats in a lot of ways, but sort of keep people in a general direction. We have a much more bipolar, or sorry, multipolar situation that's developed. China is certainly a significant global power at this point, developing capability for global power projection. The United States is, I don't want to say that it's burning itself to the ground. It's the United States is certainly, I think, putting itself at risk of losing a lot of international position and a lot of international clout. If what hasn't already been lost, what remains is certainly at risk and at jeopardy. But they still remain an incredibly formidable military power at the moment. How they choose to use that. Russia is certainly not the military power that it even was 3.5 years ago. They've obviously expended vast amounts of gold and treasure and blood in Ukraine, but there's still a lot there. There's still a lot that can bounce back from that. The EU, as sclerotic as it may look sometimes, there's semblance of genuinely coming together there for much closer cooperation, including on defense aspects. Iran is obviously a fairly substantial global, regional player. I shouldn't say global, a significant regional player. It can certainly exert a lot of force across the region. Israel's doing its own thing. Oh man, Israel. Yeah, there's a variety of regional powers that are certainly coming to the fore. I think Vietnam is one to certainly keep an eye on over the next coming decade or so. Based on all of that, do I think that there's the semblance of a new Cold War, Cold War 2.0 forming? Maybe, but I think avoiding hot war is probably going to be a lot more difficult in over the next 5 years, I would say. And if things do go to a hot war, obviously there's no more conversation about a Cold War. So that's my answer to that, which is really not a particularly firm answer to anything, but hopefully something for people to mull over and think about and just sort of consider. It's one man's opinion, obviously. It has been said, and I've heard this numerous times, historians are really bad at predicting the future. We spend our time in the past looking at things that have firmly happened and trying to bring interpretations and whatnot. Prognostication has never been my forte. I certainly know what I would like to see, but yeah, that's yeah. Let's see. This is sort of related from Professor Watt. What's my current take on the latest events in Ukraine? This war could be over today. All that needs to happen for this war to finish is that Russia needs to stop shooting and Russia needs to go home. They do that and the war is over. Ukraine is defending its own sovereignty, its own internationally recognized sovereignty, its own internationally recognized sovereignty by the country that invaded it. Do I think Ukraine is in a winning position? No. Do I think that they're in a losing position? Tentatively, no. The amount of ground that's being exchanged is, I mean, I've seen it described as World War I level, exchanges in territory. Western Front, World War I. They're very small, advances, going either way. There's been some erosion, obviously, of Ukrainian ground in specific areas, and that's bad if you support, and you're in favor of Ukraine maintaining its own sovereignty. Do I think, though, that Russia can win? What does win mean? That's a whole other question as well. I don't know. It's an ongoing thing. I think what this reminds me of at this point is Korea. And it's very much these there's tit for tat offensives, and it's going back and forth, and these small pockets of land that are being exchanged back and forth, while discussion and talk about trying to find a way to negotiate. But until both sides are genuinely ready to talk, I don't see this ending. but there's not going to be a collapse on either side. I don't see that, barring some sort of major change, barring some sort of major introduction and change in the battlefield, like if the drone equivalent of a tank, or like some sort of, like, absolute game changing technology, that there was no immediate response to, was introduced onto the battlefield. I don't see this as being, this is a slugging match that over the course of like a decade, yes, Ukraine is going to lose, but Russia can't keep up that type of slugfest. They don't have the manpower, they don't have the economic ability to maintain that and still keep everything else running. There's areas of Russia that are having problems keeping the lights on. Like gas, if you look at gas prices in certain areas, especially towards the south, towards like nearer to the Ukrainian border, there's been severe gas shortages because the Ukrainians have been hitting the refinery systems, so consistently over such a long period of time that it's chewing into that. Do I have a take on what's going to happen? I don't. I think this will eventually come to some sort of a negotiated settlement. Whether it's an actual long-term settlement or whether it's putting things on hold is really going to be dependent on what kind of international tripwires can be established in Ukraine. There's Kyiv won't settle for another Budapest memorandum. Like, they just won't. Like, they will keep fighting until they have concrete security guarantees, because they've been screwed over by the West, in which is how we got to this point. So yeah, that's sort of, until those firm tripwires, and if that means European or North American or some sort of international peacekeeping force, whatever you want to call that, being put on the ground there, that's it. That's going to be at that point, I think the Ukrainians agree to something, but obviously then the Russians have to acquiesce to it as well. So who knows? So that's a quagmire and a half, both literal and figurative. Yeah. Let's see. I am just Mathwiz, imagine it's 21:25 and the history content creators have to somehow distill the past 5 years into video form. I feel so there's going to be so many PhD theses that are going to be written, and in every single field imaginable, of things that have happened and things that are stemming out of the last 5 years, since sort of March 2020 with the beginning of pandemic, through to whenever this waking nightmare comes to an end. Yeah, like there's going to be so much to pull and extract and analyze that comes out of this. History students are going to hate the 2020s, because how do you even explain half of what's happened? It's mind-boggling, just how much has happened in the last 5 years. Ask yourself, well, I'm old, but ask yourself where you were 6 years ago and what you thought 6 years was going to look like, and now look back and think, were you close on any of that? I was not. So yeah, that's I feel for history creators, I feel for teachers, I feel for students. The content creators are going to have an absolute that are probably already are having a field day. They're going to have even more of a field day. So yeah, that's good luck out there for those in the future. That's yeah. Sister A, have I seen the documentary? It's not a documentary, it is a movie, The Death of Stalin. Yes, that is a fantastic movie. Jason Isaacs as Zhukov is absolutely brilliant in that film. And amazing film. If anybody who hasn't seen Death of Stalin, watch me first, donate some money if you can along the way. And then go watch it. I'm pretty sure it's still on Netflix in Canada, but whatever you need to do, like whether it's whatever subscription service it may happen to be on, it's absolutely worth the money. I don't necessarily suggest to anybody to sail the high seas to watch a movie. But The Death of Stalin is absolutely worth. If you're going to do that, Death of Stalin is a movie that's absolutely worth it. Fantastic, historically quite. Um, they did quite well with it. There's some deviations, obviously, because it's a movie, like it's etc. But if you ever get a chance, if you haven't, there are some of the production interviews, and some of the sort of the post interviews about the movie. There's some really fascinating stuff. Like they had each of the main actors have different English accents, to represent different regional accents that Molotov and Beria and Khrushchev and all the figures from the movie, they all have different English accents from different parts of the UK. I shouldn't say just English accents, different British accents, and they sort of correlate to these geographic differences that, and accent differences that, the actual Russian and Soviet leadership had. So little tiny things that have sort of been deliberately done, but fascinating when you sort of go through the post production stuff. So yeah. Uh, where do I live? Where did that question go? There it is. Where do I live? I live in Southern Ontario. I live in the Toronto area. So that's whether that's where I'm stuck. Thanks to housing prices, there's absolutely nowhere to go. That still be close enough to work, etc. So I live here, and it's I'm getting old, and as I get old, I want to move away from where the people are to where the people aren't, and it's been tough thanks to housing pricing. So, but certainly Toronto is not the only place in the world that's been subjected to that. I think that's fairly common in a lot of places. So, um, yeah, let's see. Um, Mark spent the 1980s in West Germany, spending much time in West Berlin. Um, Crazy. I mean, I don't know, Mark, if you were there when the wall, if you were there sort of in '89 when the wall came down, or if you may have been away at that point. Berlin, I've never been to Berlin. I've been to Munich in Germany, but never been to Berlin. Would absolutely love to go. For just There's so much history there that I'm fascinated by. Um, those of you who've listened to me prattle on and other things, my initial interest and love of history came about from Second World War history. Um, so the whole, the rise of the Nazis and the interwar period in the 30s, absolutely fascinating how Berlin sort of played into that, and the sort of the remolding of the capital from Berlin into that was supposed to be Germania by being designed by Albert Speer. And then I found this side passionate interest that's turned into a lot of my life at this point, of being the Cold War in Berlin sort of carries through. So there's so much history in the city that I would love to be able to actually go and see. Um, but yeah, that's Berlin. We actually need to do some. I want to come back to some episodes on Germany, in that sort of the Cold War period, that Ostpolitik, and like we need to address that. We sort of finished up around the Berlin Wall period, and we need to sort of carry that forward a bit. My time has been soaked up and taken up by Dreams of Indochina at the moment. I'm the primary researcher and writer on all of that, and that's been soaking up an awful lot of time. But we will be coming back to GDR on that. Ned Richardson Little, who's I can't remember where Ned's where he's a professor, but he has a new book coming out in the next couple of days. Actually, that's sort of a more academic look at a history of the GDR, or the DDR, as I keep calling it and then getting corrected because I'm not German. And I think it's more for anybody who read Katja Hoyer's book a couple of years ago. It's a more academic look, sort of a different angle and a different approach to looking at the same period of history, and different approach. Katja's entire purpose of the book was to provide a more human feel, and to sort of give an idea, sort of she wanted to very much convey the idea that the people who lived in East Germany were just people who lived in East Germany, and it was a country, and the people that lived there were their citizens, and they lived their lives and they lived their day, and this was their hopes and their dreams and what they wanted to hope and go forward with. They weren't it wasn't it's not a book that's about politics and about like the idea that it's to march west and to conquer and to do any of those things. It's about people living their lives and how that unfolded through the 40-year history of the DDR. But Ned's book is coming out in the next couple of days, and it's a more academic look at it. And I'm really looking forward to that as well, just sort of to read. And I'm possibly would like to do an actual book review episode, sort of doing a compare and contrast against the two of them, because I think it might be a really interesting sort of way to approach a more complete look at East German history. So, yeah. But thank you. I mean, Mark, you may have commented. It's again, I'm talking far longer with each question than you guys are probably commenting on. I'd be curious to know if you were in Berlin when the wall came down, and just sort of see what you have, if you have comments or like recollections that stand out about that. So, yeah. Let's see. That's does China actually get any benefit if they take Taiwan other than just prestige? That's hard to That's a very difficult question to answer, because so much of that is dependent on how, if Taiwan was to be reabsorbed into a single Chinese state, um, it's that's very much dependent on how it's absorbed. If it's absorbed in sort of a more peaceful format, then yeah, China does actually can. There's an opportunity there for China to gain a lot. If they have to go to war over it, and depending on how that, if there's spillage, let's call that, from that, then no. So it really, like, that's a again, that's coming back to this prognostication thing. I can't tell the future. So much of that is dependent on the format of how that would happen. So um, I my initial gut feeling, and after a few beers, that's actually a fairly substantial gut. Um, Really, like their main purpose around Taiwan, to me, is very much about prestige. They've been talking about that since 1949. That's been a continual talking point through successive governments and leaders. Um, that there's a lot to don't underestimate. I wouldn't underestimate that it's just prestige. There's a lot riding on it for China in their own image, but never underestimate how far that can go. So again, my opinion. Um, Kalen, let me. Would it be correct to call Russia, as well as the former USSR areas, a rump state of it? Sorry, Kalen, I'm not sure that I'll be honest, I'm not sure that I understand the question necessarily. Or if you're asking, is Russia a rump state of the Soviet Union, or is Ukraine? Put something in the, like, clarify if you're still in the chat. Hopefully you are. Put something in put the question in. When I get to it, I'll try to answer it based on a bit more clarification. That would be appreciated. But what's this guy's name? This guy's name is David. So, and he's your host. Will Nepal declare war on Zimbabwe? Yes, at some point, based on the multitude of billions of permutations and combinations. Yes, eventually that will come up. It will be nothing like the Finnish-Korean hyperwar. However, the Nepali-Zimbabwean global meganet war is going to be just devastating. So hold on. Let's see. Yes, I knew that this question was going to be coming up. Can we make a video on the Cuban Missile Crisis? Yes, and I've been promising this for about 3 or 4 years, I think, at this point. Yes, we will get to the Cuban Missile Crisis. Sort of an explanation, like a mea culpa, maybe. You guys probably all know everything that there is to know about the Cuban Missile Crisis anyways. I get into these little sidetracked projects on things that I'm interested in because I don't know anything about them, and I sort of dive into these rabbit holes. And hopefully I can take some of you guys with me because it's fun. The Shostakovich episode, which I think maybe 5 of you probably watched a couple months ago, 2 months ago. That was absolutely something that was I've been wanting to do that episode in that script for a long, long time. And I finally said, you know what? I know that nobody's going to watch it, but to hell with it, I'm going to do it. And I absolutely loved doing it because it was a bunch of new information and a bunch of new stuff and a new bunch of new thoughts and perspectives that became apparent to me, and then I got to bring hopefully to those of you who watched it. How does that link to the Cuban Missile Crisis? It doesn't link directly to the Cuban Missile Crisis, but everybody knows about the Cuban Missile Crisis. I mean, this is one of these things. Like, what new thing am I going to bring to the Cuban Missile Crisis? That being said, yes, I absolutely promise we are going to do our Cuban Missile Crisis episode. I promise. It probably won't have anything new that you don't already know, but hopefully we can get something out there and we can move on to a new question that you guys can ask me perpetually. So that's just snark from me. Don't worry about that. So, Bay of Pigs video. Yes, we did a Bay of Pigs video 2.5 to 3 years ago, I want to say. Came out pretty well. I was quite satisfied with it. But yes, there is a Bay of Pigs episode on that. So that's yeah. Oh, I have a $10 donation from this guy the guy down the street, and I can't say thank you enough for that. That means I say this. I mean, I've said this in previous ones where people have made donations. It really, really does mean the world to me when anybody tunes in to watch. When you guys come into something like an impromptu live chat, to spend a bit of time of your time, I mean, time is precious. Like your valuable time, and then to be able to make a donation to us, that really does mean a lot, and I really do appreciate that. It's not an obligation, obviously, from anybody. Like the videos are public; they're there for people to watch. But the financial support certainly goes a long way to making sure that we can continue to do this because we have people to pay. It's this is not a gratis thing that we do on our side. We do it because we love it, but there's costs involved with this. So any sort of dollars and cents, really appreciate it. Now that being said, thoughts on the Chinese military parade? Do I think that the three major leaders together is the forming of an Axis type alliance? Sort of what I was talking about earlier. The Chinese, from what I saw, the Chinese certainly know how to put on a military parade. It looked radically different from the one in DC that I saw earlier this year. But do I think that there's three major leaders? Is it the beginning of something? Who knows? Is it camera opportunity? I don't know. I think the big winner from all that is certainly North Korea. That's the first, to my knowledge, that's the first time a North Korean leader has been sort of publicly seen and that publicly outed is the wrong word, but that publicly like faced together with like the leader of Russia and of China. Like that's a big deal. Is it an opportunistic type thing, or is it actually something more more concrete? Only time is going to tell from that. But I think it's definitely something to watch. If you'd have asked me 3 years ago if I thought I was going to see that, I would have said no. North Korea was still very much a pariah state even 3 years ago. Obviously, that's changing. They're I'm trying to come up with a butterfly analogy, and I can't come up with anything. But it's like a moth opening its wings. That really is. They're coming out on the world stage that doesn't involve invading South Korea in 1950. Whether this turns into an actual like sort of more proper alliance going forward, that's anybody's guess. So, but it's a it's a reasonable question that that most people should be asking and should be thinking about and addressing at this point. Let's see. Oh, here we go. This is, how's the family? How's the dog? Family's family's good. There's been some with my in-laws. There's been some illness that's going on. It's kind of made the year a little bit tough. But everybody's good at the moment, and all those things. So we all carry on. We have, for anybody who's been here for a while but may have missed the last couple, we actually lost one of our dogs earlier in the year. Again, part of the shitty thing that's happened in 2025. But we still have the black and white dog for anybody who may have seen pictures of my dog from previous live streams. He's still with us and doing great. And then we have a foster that came to us, and he's like a little Chihuahua Dachshundy kind of mix. We thought we would have him for a week, and he was super cute and everything, and he'd be immediately adopted. And we're like 2.5 months later, and we still have him with nobody looking to adopt a dog. So I think he just thinks that he lives here now. So but everybody's good. Thank you very much for asking that question. That is always appreciated, to take a personal interest. Thank you. Vihan, yes. Could we make videos on Gorbachev and the Soviet breakup and the end of the Cold War? Yeah, we absolutely will. But that obviously, and I hope you can appreciate that we're saving those sort of direct videos for when we start wrapping up the channel, and that's how we're going to start bringing things on the channel to a close. There's no plans on that at the moment, provided things remain stably viable, financially viable. Donate. Yes, there's absolutely going to be plans to look at those. Gorbachev is he's a fascinating character, and like figure in history, fascinating for both. He's absolutely deified in a lot, like on the foreign stage, especially in the West. He is absolutely vilified by many inside Russia and inside some members of, like, some people that lived from the former Soviet republics, as the man who ended the good times. Yeah, like he's a really polarizing figure, and he's a fascinating man in his own right. I keep thinking of him as the last true believer of like Marxism, Leninism, even in the dying days of the Soviet Union. Like, that's reportedly, like, he spent, by all accounts, he would spend nights, like he would spend hours pouring through the works of Lenin, looking for a solution to the problems that were besetting the country. Like, it almost like it's the best analogy that I've seen is almost like, it's like a religious figure pouring through the Bible, looking for, like, looking for salvation, looking for answers to come from, like, the Word of God. Like, Gorbachev would literally spend hours through the night, like, reading the works of Lenin, looking for his salvation. So yeah, like, it's like, absolutely, like, you can't do a Cold War channel without looking at Gorbachev, and Gorbachev in terms of the fall of the Soviet Union, in terms of the relationships to, like, the former, to the satellite countries, and how that liberation and that change happened, and then in terms of how, like, the relationship to Reagan. That's a fascinating sort of, like, these two men that shouldn't have had anything in common, that got along gangbusters, which should tell us that people really aren't that different at the end of the day. You just have to find common ground. Yeah, like, we'll absolutely do those. And I'm very much looking forward to doing them, because there's a lot of stuff in there that I want to explore myself. So, let's see. That's Sister A. Have I seen Charlie Wilson's War? Yes. And have I seen Lord of War? Yes, with both Tom Hanks and Nicolas Cage, Crazy Eyes. Yes, I've seen both of those. Both. I liked Charlie Wilson's War. Apparently, it's. I'd have to go back and really watch it for detail, but it played fairly fast and loose with the accuracy. But it's a fun movie that sort of tells a very, where the story's going, et cetera, et cetera. But fun, and like, Tom Hanks is such a great actor in so many ways. Um, that really entertaining. I have seen Lord of War. I was I was either really sick or I was really hungover, which is probably both the same. So I don't remember chunks of it because I think I was sort of napping and dozing through it. So I have seen it, but I'm probably not the best figure to comment on how good and or bad Lord of War is with Crazy Eyes Nicolas Cage. It's all about the rats. Let's see. Any book recommendations on the Brezhnev years? You know what, Professor What, you have hit on the one of the books that I would love to see, which is I would love a really strong biography of Brezhnev. That's something that I think is absolutely lacking at the moment. There's been some work, and there's been a few sort of cursory works that have come out, but I don't think that there's, in English, anyways, I should clarify that in English, there hasn't been a single volume sort of like, dedicated, proper, it's peer-reviewed work of like a biography of Brezhnev. And I'd really love to see that. The Brezhnev years are, so to begin with, I mean, the Brezhnev years sort of have, there's two, you can almost split them up into two. There's the early part, and then there's the early Brezhnev years, and then there's the latter Brezhnev years. And the early Brezhnev years, Brezhnev is actually quite a reformer. And he's very much interested in, he's dynamic, he's seen as a go-getter, he's all the things that you don't think of Brezhnev as being. And then, it's like Brezhnev goes through, like, he was an addict, he goes through like some addiction issues and some rehab, and then strokes and age and all those things, the gerontocracy starts really setting in. And that's sort of when you see the real stagnation set in with the Soviets, and it's all sort of papered over by high oil prices. So I don't know that I can give any recommendation necessarily on the Brezhnev years, but there's certainly lots of like oblique works that would be addressing aspects of it. I would need to do, I can't think of anything off the top of my head that might be immediately appropriate. If you send us an email, I mean, and remind me, I'll certainly see if I can get together a couple of books that I can recommend. But I'd have to do a little bit of digging just to refresh my memory, because it isn't a period that I've covered myself as of yet, anything with. But there's certainly some really interesting stuff within the Brezhnev years. But I'm really hoping that someone's going to do a proper peer-reviewed academic style biography of Brezhnev. Orangina time. Do I think I could get more views if I started to cover the modern Cold War and not just the historical one? I'm a historian, or I play one on YouTube. I prefer to stick to the history in terms of what I'm comfortable with. The modern Cold War, if it's even a Cold War, see earlier in the conversation for my thoughts on that. The modern Cold War is politics. It's so fraught with so much uncertainty. Could we get more views? Probably, possibly. The YouTube algorithm is really quite messy at the moment. It prioritizes shorts and reels and stuff over everything else. So longer format histories and longer format videos like ours don't tend to get recommended, unless they really, like, the level of recommendations are way down. And with that, views are down. That seems to be the case with a lot of channels across the board. And the problem with shorts is that shorts don't generate any revenue, which, for people who are doing this, like, are dependent on this as a living, this is a really tough spot for a lot of people within the creator community. If I streamed games all the time, then I could probably do pretty well, but no one wants to watch me game because I'm boring as fuck. So, pardon my French. this isn't rated not for kids anyway, so to hell with it. Yeah, so that's my answer. Like, it's, I mean, could we get more views? Yeah, we might get some more views. But honestly, at the end of the day, I don't do this for views. I do this because I am passionate about a subject, and I'm passionate about bringing knowledge and information to anybody who's willing to watch and to listen. So that's really, at the end of the day, if there's a bit of money in it at the end, that's fantastic as well. But it really is for love of the subject. Yeah, that's let's see. So a couple of questions. If I follow the Time Ghost in their World War II series, asking Mark Felton. This is a dark confession. I don't watch YouTube, like, at all. It's not. The only YouTube channel that I watch is our own videos when I'm trying to proof them. That's honestly, that's really about it. I'm not a YouTube guy. I spend my time, for better or for worse. I'd probably learn lots more about things, but I spend most of my time, if I'm not working, if I'm not, doing family and life stuff, I'm reading. Like, that's, I have a book, and it's, it's a different form of learning than YouTube stuff. There's lots of great content creators out there, like really top notch, better than what certainly better presenting than what I do. Our production values are usually pretty damn good. But there's lots of other creators out there that are doing excellent work. I don't look at it. I genuinely don't look at this as being as a competitive space. There's room out there for everybody, and as viewers, you guys are absolutely spoiled for choice. And count your lucky stars. Back when I was a kid, you can see all the gray in my beard. Back when I was a kid, like, it's like you'd get documentaries a few times a week on TV, and didn't matter if you were interested in the subject or not. That was the documentary for the week. Anyways, and you kids get off my lawn, et cetera, et cetera. So, yeah, that's people are spoiled for choice. There's lots of great content out there, and I certainly know that, it's like that, real-time history and, Time Ghost and lots of other channels out there are doing excellent work. Please keep watching our stuff, but go check them out as well. There's lots of room. Yeah, that's hopefully that's my answer there. So, that's, why did JFK have a Republican in his cabinet? So McNamara is one of the whiz kids. I mean, as SecDef, the partisanship that we see in the present is unusual. Historically speak, within the last 100 years or so, that the degree and the level of partisanship that we're seeing is relatively unusual. I'm going to qualify all of this because there's going to be somebody that's going to jump in and chime in with the correction on this, and that's fine. Having other voices within the cabinet is actually, like, that's a healthy thing to do. It means that it breaks up the echo chamber. It's smart. JFK is an interesting president in that he's not the golden saint. He absolutely isn't the golden saint that the Kennedys would have always have endeavored very much to portray as, and that has been proclamated and sort of perpetuated. The assassination thing certainly absolutely helped with that. Don't speak ill of the dead, etc. But having up, like, members of the other side within your cabinet to be able to proffer, it's like advice and, contrarian viewpoints is actually a really healthy thing. It's a healthy thing to do, and it really should be, like, de rigueur, in my opinion. McNamara was also, it's like he was the former head of Ford, if I'm thinking correct. I'm pretty sure that was McNamara. Absolute whiz with numbers and analytics, and sort of, transformational change which is what JFK was trying to do. Like, it was about picking the right person for the job, despite their politics, as opposed to picking their politics and then fitting them into a job. Um, yeah, like that's hopefully, I mean, that's how I read that. That's how I've always read that. And I again, like I think having more bipartisan effort is a better and healthier thing to do, especially in a two-party system. I am lucky that I live in a three and a half party system. So there's a slight more choice, sometimes not, but that's a whole, I'm not going to get into that as part of this. Um, but in a true two-party system, which the US absolutely is, where everything's formulated and set up against two oppositional parties, having bipartisanship and bipartisan voices is really important. Especially like at the time that Kennedy was had assumed the presidency. There's an awful lot going on at that point. So um, the Finnish Karelian Hyperwar, can I convince kings and generals to do a video about it? I believe that everyone who's ever spoken to anybody with KG has asked for a video on the Finnish Korean Hyperwar. It may happen. I don't hold your breath, but it may happen. You never know. You might get that Nepal Zimbabwe war before you get before you get that one. So um, let's see. This looks like from Adam. Am I familiar with the English Marxist theoretician Alan Woods? I'm not. I will qualify that. Kind of obsessed with Shostakovich as a figure who resisted Stalin, and I came to a different conclusion. If you read if it's like look at the history of Shostakovich up until 40, into sort of the late 40s, up until about 48, I want to say. He did resist Stalin, and then he caved into Stalin. If you keep reading like past that date, he absolutely caved into Stalin. Then Stalin died. I mean, like, no, that the whole Stalin dying thing, and he became Shostakovich became more of a tool of the state as the state softened, and that's really the conclusion. He became, I referred to him as an apparatchik, and I think that was kind of it's probably a mean and not quite an accurate thing for me to call him. But he very much became a tool of the state, but it was a softened state from when Stalin was in charge. He did resist Stalin, and he did that through the 30s and through like part of the 40s. And then he had a family, and he was getting older, and he had more of an established like life to look after, and he stopped resisting Stalin. He gave in, and like it's you look at the speech at the Waldorf Astoria that he gave. I'm sure it was 48. It might have been 49. Um, Dates are not my strong suit. But yeah, like but I mean that's part of the whole history is history is gray and not shades of black and white. There isn't a single answer. You can come to a conclusion at one point in time, then you read more, and like things are going to shift. I think Shostakovich, that's part of what makes Shostakovich so interesting, is that he was a rebel, and then he wasn't. Um, and I think that's the case with a lot of people, not just in the Soviet Union, but like lots and lots of different places. We did our hagiography of Angela Davis the other week, and she was absolutely a firebrand, and it's like an oppositional figure to the U.S. government through the 60s and through the 70s and into the 80s. She ran as vice president, like running on the Communist Party ticket. Um, and look at her for the last 25 years. She's much more teaching, like working within the system. Does that make her less of an oppositional figure? Does that make her less of a firebrand? Yes, no. Things change and situations change. So that's how I came. That was my conclusion from the amount of reading that I did about Shostakovich. So yeah. Um, let's see. Um, David K, another financial contribution of $10. Thank you kindly, sir. Interested to see your take on RAF, Baader Meinhof, and Red Brigades. We have those those are in process, actually, as these are brought up. We are going to be looking at a bit more look at like sort of terrorism and terrorist cells, and sort of how international terrorism sort of worked, and then sort of maybe taking that and using that as a framework to sort of hang some individual episodes off, looking at some specific groups, to sort of illustrate some histories. And obviously, like, Red Army faction, which is RAF, Baader-Meinhof and Red Brigades tie into that very closely. Certainly as ones operating in Europe, and then there's domestic terrorist groups that are operating in the US as well, that operate slightly differently again, but it's all sort of ties into this left-wing terrorism, right-wing terrorism, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, let's see, just sort of scrolling down here. Have you ever watched any of Sarah Payne's talks or read her books? No, I haven't actually. I will plead ignorance. I'm actually not familiar with the name. When I first read that, I thought it said Sarah Palin. I'm like, yeah, well, I am actually familiar with Sarah Palin, but I haven't seen her speak in like many years, and I certainly haven't read her books. But pop a comment, Mathwiz, in, if like just sort of like explain who she is and what she's about, and yeah, that would be great. That's Adam Richmond has joined our Patreon. Thank you very kindly, sir. Or actually, no, it's no, you would have, like, through Comfortable. Thank you. That's very much appreciated. Again, that's someone who's pledging on a slightly longer term basis, and really do appreciate the support. Thank you, Adam. Much obliged. Yeah, lots of people asking, like, to cover modern Cold War. For those of you who may not have seen my response, talking about this earlier, I don't even know that there is a modern Cold War, so much as are we just brewing up to a hot war. So I currently have no plans to be looking at anything to do with, like, certainly from an analytical perspective, in terms of looking at the present situation. That's the news, folks. I'm a historian, and I prefer to. I feel far more comfortable making firm comments about history rather than I do about the present. So there's a lot of uncertainty and there's a lot of uncomfortableness that exists at the moment. So let's see, from Michalis from Greece. My Greek pronunciation is terrible. We'll make more videos about Greece and other Balkan countries. Yes, absolutely. We certainly plan to come back to the juntas in Greece. We have to look at that, and that's something we certainly want to look at, the Cyprus, and how Greece and Turkey sort of play into that. Obviously, like the invasion and the partition of the island. So we will be certainly coming back to Greece and other Balkan countries. At some point, we will be getting to the Yugoslav wars of independence in the early 90s. That is still a Cold War story. The Cold War proper was over, but that's sort of these hangover wars. But so yeah, we'll certainly be taking a look at that. Whether we look at how much we look at sort of like, it's in the 90s at least, of other Balkan countries, whether that be Romania, Bulgaria, Albania, the former Yugoslav republics, etc. We'll look at that, even if it is just to see how the collapse of communism and sort of the collapse of the Soviet Union as a important patron, how that impacted new countries emerging and new independent countries emerging. That's that. Again, time-wise, I'm not sure when we'll get to that, but that's certainly like part of the intent of coverage. So that's. What are my thoughts on how much money Krusty Burger lost with the Soviets boycotted the '84 Olympic Games? Oh yeah, Krusty lost a fortune on that. It was really terrible. Between that and all the alimony, I don't know how that guy does it. So his little tiny feet. Let's see. Simpsons reference for anybody who may be wondering what the hell I'm talking about. So. Do I know about the Ushanka Show on YouTube? Yes, I have actually spent a bit of time hanging out with Sergey. We did some interviews with him. They can be found on some of the earlier the early playlist. We did a couple of interviews. He was, I mean, for anybody who knows Sergey and has watched his channel, I'm sure you already know this. But for anybody who might not know, he was in Ukraine. That's where he grew up when the Chernobyl disaster occurred. He got to play outside through Chernobyl. We did some interviews and that with him talking about, and we did a conversation talking about cars. We did a conversation talking about his experience of Chernobyl, and a couple of conversations I think at least about sports. And they're up on the channel, and certainly go and check them out. They were lots of fun to do. They were the first interviews that I've ever done. I look incredibly uncomfortable as I keep looking at the camera, um, but I didn't realize that until afterwards, and I've learned not to do that anymore. So yeah, let's see. Moving along. So yes, that's certainly another YouTube channel out there that's presenting more personalized stories and personalized histories of the Cold War, and like, sort of life in the Soviet Union and post-Soviet life, and like all of those things. Fascinating content and information. So um, let's see. Sorry, I'm now being referred to as old school. And thank you, Siste, for calling me old school as opposed to just old. So um, yeah. Andrew asking if we are going to do any videos on the Troubles in Ireland. Yes, absolutely. Um, yeah, and I have two sort of like thoughts and ideas in terms of how I want to approach that. I want to certainly approach that as being one from the I want to present the Irish side, and that's going to be both I was going to call them the green and the orange. I want to do that as both, like, from the Irish side, whether that's whichever side. I want to do that from the Irish side, but I also want to be able to take a look and see what the troubles were like for people who were living in the UK. And the reason for that is that there's a different angle and a different approach to it that you can look at, where the troubles basically created a nation at war. Like, it was almost like a civil war. It's a nation at war with itself, and how that impacted and changed British society through the 70s and into the 80s. I have numerous acquaintances that all served in the Royal Army um, through the 80s and in the early 90s. Um, and many of them have said that they got lucky when they got posted to places like Bosnia as part of UNFOR, part of the NATO force, that the NATO reaction force that was being sent into to the Balkans, as opposed to having to go do what was essentially like, what's the word I'm looking for? Guard duty isn't the right word, but being deployed to Northern Ireland, which was until the Dayton Peace Accords. Dayton? No, Good Friday Agreement. Sorry, Dayton was the Middle East. Until the Dayton Good Friday Agreement really was like an incredibly dangerous place to go. Terrorist attacks that were being carried out in England as opposed to like just in Ireland. So I mean, there's two different ways, and I think it's from a historical perspective, I think it's a really interesting approach that we can take to it. So yeah, that's my long answer to a short question. So um, yes. Let's see. Um, Watch an old documentary on YouTube. Wish we still had those instead of the History Channel. But where else are you going to learn about, aliens invading, like, it's aliens invading and, like, stealing Hitler's brain, except on the History Channel after midnight. That and Pawn Stars. So, yeah, good times. Um, let's see. other questions? Sorry, guys, I'm just reading a little bit here. Let's see. Have I seen Sister A with lots of questions this evening? Have I seen the movie The Killing Fields? Yes, absolutely. That is and to know that is very much based on a true story, and relatively accurate, is just devastating. It's heart wrenching. We will certainly be looking at Cambodia and the genocide that happened there. It's on my ever growing list of how to cover the Indochina Wars, because obviously, like, Cambodia and the Khmer Rouge is a direct result of the wars in Indochina. For those of you who may not have been seeing the more recent videos, we are 2 released videos now into the series on Indochina. We did our first one looking at colonial Indochina, and then we've looked at the beginning of the first Indochina War, and there's lots and lots more coming on that, building up towards how we're going to cover Vietnam, but taking our time with the first Indochina War, because my own discovery through my own research is that you can't really explain how the American war in Vietnam played out the way that it did, without looking first at how it played out for the French. So we're taking our time on that because I think there's some really interesting parallels in terms of decisions made and decisions not made, in terms of how that all plays out. So please stay tuned. Yeah. Let's see. Oh, I'm actually starting to catch up on the questions here, guys. So that's which means that you guys are either losing interest or I've just been talking for a long time. So okay. Let's see. Oh, that's an interesting question. The Spanish transition, and then ETA, and well, actually, do we have anything in the pipeline? No, we don't have anything in the pipeline at the moment. Looking at Spain at the moment, but I keep thinking I want to go. Part of me wants to go back to look at a bit of like more, not recent Spanish history, but sort of the post-Franco period of Spanish history, which would take us much closer into the present. Now, Kais, I don't know if you're Spanish or just have an interest in Spanish history. Spanish history is actually can be very difficult to approach because it's so heavily ideologically permeated, even in the present. I've spoken with a number of individuals who are working on PhDs in Spanish history, whatnot, and nobody wants to talk about the Spanish Civil War and Spanish politics beyond, because there's been very little, not even I won't say attempt, but there's been very little real reconciliation in terms of how Spain has dealt with the Civil War and then the Franco years, and then the idea of once Franco was dead and like this starting to like sort of the modernization and the liberalization of Spain was to just sort of tamp everything down and like stuff it into a box and shove it away in a closet and hope that nobody goes looking for it. History doesn't work that way. Someone's obviously going to be going looking for it, but it's not without myself learning Spanish and going and like, it's like delving through like the boxes of documents to figure out what all that stuff is myself. Getting good and accurate source material to work with, to be able to do those episodes is complicated. It's difficult. It probably would be easier if I did know Spanish. That didn't consist of me having a few beers and feeling more comfortable in Spanish. But I'd be very curious. And I mean, even just better. I see little snippets of like, it's like Barcelona talking about Real and Real talking about Barca, and like, it's like there's very much this like it permeates that deeply, and it still exists in like modern retellings of football club history. Now, obviously, those are the two, like, the two examples. But it runs really, really deep. And I don't have enough background in it to do it justice without doing probably a good year's worth of research. And unless one of you guys out there has an awful lot of money to be able to pay me to take a year off work and do that, if you do, great, fantastic, please, and I'm happy to go do it. But yeah, that's Spanish history is incredibly interesting. I think we'd probably have better luck doing something on ETA and the Basque movement than we would on doing anything to do with Franco. Although my personal interest would actually be doing on the liberalization movement in Spain through the late 70s into the 80s. So, anyways, that's a long sort of rambling non-answer there, but I don't know if that is. Yeah, I don't know if that's that. Do I think Tito possibly had Stalin assassinated? Nope, I don't. No, there's no evidence of that. That's something that big, something that monumental. There'd be evidence of it. If evidence comes out at some point, and there's like the document comes out, I will absolutely retract the statement. But as things stand right now, no, I don't think that there's any merit to that. I think there's great conversations about the two of them trying to kill each other. And there's great like speculation. It's sit and have a couple of beers with a couple of people and sort of like chat about stuff like that. But do I think that actually happened? No, not at all. Oh, that's a question. How many people would actually have died if all the nukes had been launched, including the aftermath, and would civilization survive? How many people would actually have died if everything had gone off? Everybody. Like there's no, and that's a facetious answer. Like, no, it's like, would civilization survive? Something would survive. Would it survive as anything that we resemble now? No, not at all. Is it any way that you would want to live? No, not at all. If 20% of the weapons had been launched, I wouldn't want to live in that world. If I wasn't part of if I wasn't a victim of ground zero, I would be offing myself pretty quick. I don't want to live in any kind of post-apocalyptic series, like any kind of post-apocalyptic environment. That's not my deal. I speaking as an old man who remembers the 80s and who remembers like the absolute how much focus and attention and concern there was over the absolute devastation that nuclear weapons could create, I think that globally we very much lost a connection to that sense of terror. There's a lack. I don't think there's a real. What's the word I'm looking for? Is it respect? I mean, I don't know if that people have an appropriate respect for what nuclear weapons could actually do to the planet. We all need to go back and watch The Day After, and go back and watch Threads, go back and watch a few of these, like some of these movies, and get a sense, like that this is nuclear weapons aren't tools. They're devastating. They're weapons of devastation. Like that's genuinely. And when one gets used, there will be retaliation, and that you hit the escalation ladder, and it takes a pretty big person to be able to step off of that escalation ladder. So that being said, how many people would have died? Most. Would civilization survive? Not in any way, shape, or form that we know it and resemble it, whether like resemble in the 80s versus the present, whatever. LeMay's apocryphal statement, bomb them back to the Stone Age, that would be taking us back to the Stone Age, 100%. And we still have the ability to do that in the present, and I don't think there's enough fear and respect for what that means. And that includes the idea of proliferation. That's a word that I struggle with continually. That includes this idea of proliferation. The idea that the only way that every country can be safe is that they all have nuclear weapons. That doesn't make us safe. That makes us all hostages to each other, and it means that somebody's going to use one at some point, because somebody's going to have a little tiny penis that doesn't measure up on the table, and that's how they're going to make themselves into a big man. And as soon as you hit that escalation ladder, it's over. Yeah, that's perhaps I'm slightly over passionate about this, but I think that there's nuclear weapons are terrifying and should be held with the utmost respect and fear because they are absolutely devastating what they would do. Yeah. Um, let's see. Uh, Doing videos on the roles in the Pacific Island colonies, and independence and influence in the Cold War. I mean, the big thing with the Pacific Islands through the Cold War period is probably, and this is going to be a little cliche, but it's probably their role that they played in as nuclear weapons testing grounds. Whether that's the Marshalls or whether that's Réunion for the French, um, Christmas Island for the British, and there's very much a yeah, there's people that live there, but they weren't important, so they got shipped off. They're like basically stripped away from their ancestral lands, like et cetera, et cetera. That's the big story to tell there. We may take a look at it, but the angle on that we would probably take is going to be from a nuclear victim role. Um, yeah, so that's interesting to think though that like I want to say it was the last protectorate, and I can't remember the year, but I think it was Palau. That was the last UN protectorate that was finally given its independence. Although at the size and the scale independence, I mean, those countries have often been very much codependent on other larger, more dominant nations like the United States, Australia, France, all sort of dependent. But um, yeah, that's that. Yeah, Ian, like this is Threads is a pretty good example of the horror of nuclear strikes. It really is. I mean, Threads, for anybody who hasn't seen it, it's a British film from 1984. Threads is it's a it's such a good movie, but it is absolutely don't plan on doing if you're gonna watch it, and I'm pretty sure it's both on YouTube and on Internet Archive. But if you're going to watch it, probably don't plan to do anything really particularly social afterwards. It's an incredibly depressing film, but it really brings home the terror and the power that nuclear weapons could potentially have on all of us. Um, yeah, let's see. Um, Now we're getting down into a strange debate in the comments about like what we're going to live like after the nuclear holocaust. Um, Canned goods only last so long. That's part of the problem. And if there's, yeah, anyways, that's what watch Threads. It's excellent, depressing but excellent. Um, yeah. Um, so let's see. It's does anybody have questions? Anything else that people may want to ask? I'm kind of. Am I a fan of Frida Kahlo or Diego Rivera's art? Um, I like a lot of art. Frida and Diego Rivera are not two artists that I've spent particularly a lot of time sort of, you know, admiring, studying, et cetera, et cetera. I can't claim to necessarily be a huge art person. I like going to an art gallery. I like looking at the art that's there. I have a great deal of respect for the medium and whether it's different periods, whether it's the great masters, whether it's the impressionist, post-impressionist, modernist, whatever that happens to be. Some things speak to me, some things don't. um yeah, so I will make no claims whatsoever to be any kind of sort of great art appreciator, or art be particularly knowledgeable about it. But I think art is very much the progression of art especially is a really interesting reflection of how society is changing, and what linking things back to how artists' work changes to events that are happening around them, sort of a measure don't want to say measure of politics, but it's sort of this measure of like events and life and changing society. I think that's a really fascinating thing to me about what art says. Yeah, that's me. So, have you ever seen Come and See? Yes, I have. That if you ever needed a like the Depression double bill, it would be Threads and Come and See. Iti Smatri is a Belarusian film from 1986 or 1987, I want to say, and it's about a young teenage boy that joins a partisan unit during the Second World War, and it is it's an amazing film, but it is harrowing. It's one of several films that continues to live rent free in my brain. Um, that Threads and Graveyard of the Fireflies. So um, there's your triple bill, folks. Yeah. Um, let's see. Just keep a little bit more here. I'm probably going to start wrapping this up in the next couple of minutes. No, I saw that, sister. What are my thoughts on Ayn Rand? I don't think much of Ayn Rand. I think Ayn Rand reads really well when you're 16 years old and you think you know about shit, and then you grow up and Ayn Rand is, yeah, whatever. That's people. I think people need to read other books is what people need to do. So that's my own take on Ayn Rand. Sorry, my apologies. That's yeah. Anything else? Any thoughts on Adam Smith? He what a capitalist, what a guy. That's yeah. But, no, I will say thank you very much, everybody. This has been fun. Um, it has been fun. I've been thinking about doing one of these for the last little bit, and I finally got a clear sort of evening where I wasn't bogged down with anything to do with family and friends and life and all those things. So much appreciated, everybody, for tuning in. Your support, as always, is greatly appreciated. I will toss this in at the end one more time. Financial contributions are always welcome. If you're not able to, I absolutely understand. Times can be really tough out there. Times are really tough out there for a lot of us. Even if you can't, contribute financially, tell your friends, tell your enemies, share things on social media. Spread the word. Be really annoying about it. Tell everybody about the Cold War. Get people in here. Drum up business. Let's keep us going for at least the next 6 years, because we're 6 and some years in on this. So let's keep going. So, what should we do with the bell button today? I don't know, guys. Let's the bell button thing started off as sort of a me mashing my own words together and like just telling people to press the bell button and people hearing, oh, press the bell button, and it's sort of spun into this big holy mess. Please absolutely press the bell button, keep it down, all those things. That might be BT. That's too much. That's don't ass blast the bell button, please. Just press it a little bit. That's but thank you very much, guys, and stay tuned. We will have a new video coming this weekend. Very, very excited for you guys to watch this one coming up. So on that note, thanks a lot, guys, and have a good night.